The morning sun rose over the small colony of New Haven, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Kyle Morrison stood at the edge of his family's farm, looking out at the vast wilderness beyond. He was 14 years old, tall for his age, with brown hair and curious eyes that always seemed to be searching for something interesting. Today was Saturday, which meant no school and no chores until the afternoon. It was the perfect day for an adventure. Kyle grabbed his backpack from the porch. Inside were his biology notebook, a small utility knife his father had given him, a water bottle, and some dried fruit for lunch. He was working on a school project about the local wildlife, and he needed to collect more samples from the forest. His teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had told the class to be careful and stay close to the settlement, but Kyle had already explored all the safe areas. The really interesting creatures lived deeper in the wilderness. His father, Peter Morrison, was in the barn checking on the equipment. Peter was a quiet man with strong hands and a weathered face. He had been a Marine once back on Earth, before he decided to give his family a peaceful life on this distant planet. He taught Kyle how to read tracks, how to move quietly through the forest, and most importantly, how to stay calm when things went wrong. Kyle walked past the barn without telling his father where he was going. He knew Peter would worry and probably say no. It was easier to apologize later than to ask permission now. He followed the dirt path that led away from the farm, past the other houses in the colony, and toward the forest that stretched for hundreds of miles in every direction. New Haven was a small place, home to maybe 300 people. Most of them were farmers like his father, growing crops that could survive in the alien soil. A few worked in the small factory that processed the harvests. There was one school, one medical clinic, and one security office run by Lieutenant Nina Brooks. She had 6 officers to protect the entire colony, which everyone knew was not enough if something serious happened. The planet, officially called Kepler 442d, but known to everyone as simply Kepler, was beautiful but dangerous. The air was breathable, the water was clean, and plants grew well in the soil. But there were also predators, big ones. The colonists had learned to respect the wilderness and stay close to home, especially after dark. Kyle entered the forest and immediately felt at peace. The trees here were tall and thick, with purple leaves that rustled in the gentle breeze. Strange birds called to each other from the branches, and small animals scurried through the undergrowth. He had been hiking for about an hour when he noticed something unusual. The normal sounds of the forest had stopped. No birds, no rustling leaves, nothing. Just silence. His father had taught him that silence in nature meant danger. It meant something big was nearby, something that scared all the other animals into hiding. Kyle stopped walking and listened carefully. His heart started beating faster. Maybe he should turn back. But then he heard it, a low rumbling sound coming from somewhere ahead. He moved forward slowly, staying low and keeping quiet. The rumbling grew louder. Kyle reached a small clearing and saw what was making the noise. It was a razor stalker, one of the most dangerous predators on the planet. The creature was massive, easily 3 meters long from nose to tail. It had 6 powerful legs, each ending in claws as long as kitchen knives. Its body was covered in armored scales that looked like they could stop bullets. The head was broad and flat, with a mouth full of sharp teeth and small, intelligent eyes. The razor stalker was tearing apart what looked like the remains of a smaller animal. Kyle held his breath and started backing away slowly. If he could just get back into the trees without being noticed, he would be safe. But then his foot came down on a dry branch. The crack echoed through the silent forest like a gunshot. The razor stalker's head snapped up. Its eyes locked onto Kyle. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the creature dropped its meal and turned to face him fully. Kyle could see its muscles tensing, preparing to attack. There was no way he could outrun it. The razor stalker could move faster than a car when it wanted to. Kyle's mind raced. He was in a narrow canyon with rocky walls on both sides. Behind him was the way he had come, but it was too far. The razor stalker would catch him before he made it 10 steps. In front of him was the creature. To his left and right were the canyon walls, too steep to climb quickly. He remembered something his father had told him once during one of their training sessions. Peter had said that when you cannot run and you cannot hide, you have only one choice. You stand and fight. You make yourself dangerous. Even if you know you are going to lose, you fight with everything you have. Because predators respect strength, and sometimes respect is enough to make them think twice. Kyle reached down and picked up a sharp rock from the ground. It was about the size of his fist with rough edges. He also pulled out his utility knife and flicked it open. The blade was only 4 inches long, almost useless against something as big as the razor stalker, but it was better than nothing. He planted his feet firmly on the ground and faced the creature. His hands were shaking and his legs felt weak, but he did not run. He looked straight into the razor stalker's eyes and raised his weapons. Come on, he thought. If you want me, you will have to work for it. What Kyle did not know was that he was being watched. High above the canyon on a rocky ridge, a group of aliens stood observing him through advanced equipment. They were Vexari, a reptilian species that controlled a large part of this sector of space. Their skin was covered in tough scales that ranged in color from dark green to bronze. They stood upright like humans but were taller and more muscular. Their faces were angular and fierce with golden eyes that missed nothing. Commander Zekthar was the leader of this patrol. He was a veteran warrior who had seen combat on a dozen worlds. He wore the marks of his clan proudly, scars and tattoos that told the story of his victories. Right now he was watching the human boy in the canyon with great interest. Next to him stood Sub-Commander Thrax, his second in command. Thrax was younger and more aggressive, always eager to prove himself. He looked at Kyle with confusion. Why was the small human not running? Surely it understood that it could not win against such a creature. The Vexari had landed on this planet 3 days ago to conduct surveys. They were evaluating whether the region would be suitable for their own colonies. They had been careful to avoid the human settlement, not wanting to start an incident. Relations between humans and Vexari were tense. The two species had nearly gone to war several times over territorial disputes. Commander Zekthar had ordered his team to observe the humans from a distance and learn about their capabilities. What he had seen so far was not impressive. The humans seemed weak, soft, unable to defend themselves properly. Their settlement had barely any weapons and their security force was a joke. He had almost written them off as unworthy of respect. But now, watching this young human face a predator without running, Zekthar felt something he had not expected. Curiosity. And perhaps, just perhaps, a hint of respect. In the canyon below, the razor stalker charged. It moved with terrifying speed, its claws digging into the ground as it launched itself at Kyle. The boy did not freeze. He did not cry out. Instead, he waited until the last possible second, then threw himself to the side. The razor stalker's claws missed him by inches, scraping against the rock wall where he had been standing. Kyle rolled back to his feet and slashed with his knife, catching the creature's flank. The blade bounced off the armored scales without doing any damage, but the action itself was significant. The boy was fighting back. The razor stalker turned and snarled, clearly surprised that its prey was not behaving like prey should. On the ridge, Sub-Commander Thrax shifted uncomfortably. "Should we intervene, Commander?" he asked in their clicking, hissing language. "The child will die." Zekthar did not take his eyes off the scene below. "No," he said quietly. "This is his fight. To interfere would be to dishonor him. Let us see what the human is truly made of." Kyle was breathing hard now, his body already showing signs of fatigue. The razor stalker circled him slowly, trying to find an opening. Kyle kept turning to face it, refusing to let it get behind him. He noticed that when the creature moved, there were brief moments where the gaps between its armored plates became visible. Those were the weak spots. If he could just hit one of those areas with his knife, he might be able to hurt it. The razor stalker attacked again, faster this time. Kyle barely dodged, feeling the wind from the creature's claws as they passed by his head. He swung the rock in his left hand and managed to hit the side of the razor stalker's face. The impact jarred his arm, but the creature stumbled slightly, shaking its head in annoyance. Kyle pressed his advantage. He ran forward while the creature was still disoriented and drove his knife toward the soft area under its front leg. This time the blade sank in. Not deep, but enough to draw blood. The razor stalker roared in pain and fury, spinning around and catching Kyle with its tail. The blow sent him flying backward into the canyon wall. Pain exploded through Kyle's body. He tasted blood in his mouth and realized he had bitten his tongue. His vision swam, and for a moment he thought he might pass out, but he forced himself to stand up. Kyle watched the razor stalker charge toward him with impossible speed. Time seemed to slow down. He could see every detail, the way its muscles moved under its armored skin, the hunger in its eyes, the sharp claws that would tear him apart in seconds. His body wanted to freeze, to give up, but he fought against that urge with everything he had. At the last moment, Kyle threw himself forward instead of backward. The razor stalker had not expected that. Its claws passed over him as he rolled beneath its massive body. Kyle struck upward with his knife, finding the softer flesh of its belly. The blade sank in deeper this time, and the creature screamed in rage and pain. The razor stalker bucked and twisted, trying to shake him off. Kyle held onto his knife with both hands, using it as an anchor even as the violent movements threw him around like a doll. He felt something in his left arm snap. Pain shot through him, white-hot and blinding, but he gritted his teeth and held on. If he let go now, he was finished. The creature crashed against the canyon wall, trying to crush Kyle between its body and the rocks. Kyle gasped as the air was driven from his lungs. His grip on the knife loosened, and he fell to the ground hard. The razor stalker spun around, blood dripping from the wound in its belly, and glared at him with pure hatred. Kyle tried to stand, but his left arm would not work properly. It hung at his side, useless and screaming with pain. He could taste blood in his mouth, and his vision was blurry. The world seemed to tilt and spin around him. He was losing. He had known from the start that he would lose, but some part of him had hoped for a miracle. Now that hope was fading fast. The razor stalker moved more slowly now, wounded and cautious. It had learned that this small creature could hurt it, but it was still much stronger, still much more dangerous. It circled Kyle, looking for the perfect moment to strike. Kyle turned to keep it in front of him, using his good arm to hold the knife. His hand shook badly. He was so tired. Every breath hurt. His legs felt like they might give out at any moment. On the ridge above, the Vexari patrol watched in complete silence. Even Sub-Commander Thrax, who had been skeptical about the humans' courage, now stared with something like awe. The boy should have been dead 3 times over. By all logic and reason, this fight should have ended the moment it began, but the human kept getting up, kept fighting, refused to accept defeat. "Commander," said one of the soldiers, a female named Krixva, "permission to intervene. That child has earned the right to live." Commander Zekthar's jaw clenched. Every instinct in his body wanted to agree, to save the brave young human who had displayed such incredible Krathzor, but he also knew that interfering in another warrior's battle was one of the deepest insults in Vexari culture. To take away someone's chance to die with honor was worse than letting them die, and yet this was not a Vexari warrior. This was a child of another species who knew nothing of their customs. Would it truly be dishonorable to save him? Zekthar struggled with the decision, his hand moving to the weapon at his side. In the canyon, the razor stalker decided to end this. It had been wounded and humiliated by something it considered prey. That was unacceptable. It would finish this now, quickly and brutally. The creature coiled its powerful legs and leaped. All 6 limbs spread wide, claws extended, mouth open to reveal rows of deadly teeth. Kyle saw the attack coming, but his body would not respond fast enough. He tried to dodge, but his legs gave out and he fell to his knees. The razor stalker was going to land right on top of him. He raised his knife in one last, desperate gesture, knowing it would not be enough. Then he saw the rock, the same rock he had used earlier, lying on the ground just within reach. Without thinking, Kyle grabbed it with his good hand and threw it with all his remaining strength. The rock flew straight and true, striking the razor stalker directly in its left eye just as it was about to land. The creature's roar of pain was deafening. It twisted in midair, trying to change direction, and crashed into the ground beside Kyle instead of on top of him. The impact shook the canyon. The razor stalker thrashed wildly, one claw catching Kyle across the chest and sending him tumbling backward. Kyle hit the ground and did not move. Blood soaked his shirt from multiple wounds. His breathing was shallow and ragged, but his eyes remained open, staring at the creature that had tried to kill him. The razor stalker was still alive too, but it was badly hurt. Blood poured from its belly and from the ruined eye socket. It made one attempt to stand, then collapsed. For several long moments, both hunter and prey lay still on opposite sides of the canyon floor. Then slowly, the razor stalker began to drag itself away. It was done fighting. Wounded and defeated, it retreated into the forest to find a place to heal or die. Kyle had won. Not by killing the creature, but by making it decide he was not worth the cost of continuing. Kyle watched the razor stalker disappear into the trees. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by exhaustion so complete he could barely keep his eyes open. He had survived. Against all odds, he had survived. He tried to sit up, but his body refused to obey. The world started to fade around the edges, turning gray and distant. The last thing he heard before darkness took him was the sound of movement nearby. Heavy footsteps on rock, voices speaking in a language he did not understand, strong hands lifting him carefully, and then nothing. Commander Zekthar carried the human boy in his arms as if he weighed nothing. The child was so small, so fragile. His arm was clearly broken and the wounds across his body were serious. But he was alive, and that was what mattered. Zekthar had made his decision the moment the Razor Stalker retreated. This boy had earned not just respect, but protection. "We must get him to the medical bay immediately," said Krixva, the team medic. She was already scanning the boy with her equipment. "He has internal bleeding and multiple fractures. I can stabilize him, but we need to move quickly." Sub-Commander Thrax looked troubled. "Commander, we are not supposed to make contact with the humans. If we take this child aboard our ship, it will create an incident. The High Council will demand explanations." "Let them demand," Zekthar said firmly. "I will not leave a warrior who displayed such courage to die alone in the dirt. If the Council takes issue with my decision, they may challenge me directly. But I suspect they will understand once they hear what we witnessed here today." The patrol moved quickly through the forest, carrying Kyle between them. Their ship was hidden in a clearing about a mile away. It was a sleek vessel designed for reconnaissance, with advanced stealth technology that had kept it invisible to the human colony's primitive sensors. Within minutes, they had Kyle aboard and in the medical bay. Krixva worked efficiently, using her medical tools to stop the bleeding and set the broken bones. Vexari medical technology was far more advanced than anything humans possessed. Within an hour, Kyle's condition had stabilized. He would survive, though he would need time to heal. As Krixva worked, Zekthar reviewed the recordings their equipment had captured of the battle. He watched the footage 3 times, studying every detail. The boy's tactics were crude but effective. He used the terrain to his advantage, targeted weak points, and adapted quickly when his attacks failed. More importantly, his spirit never broke. Even when death seemed certain, he continued to fight. "This changes things," Sub-Commander Thrax said quietly. He stood beside Zekthar, also watching the recordings. "I confess, Commander, I did not believe humans were capable of such courage. I thought them soft, weak, unworthy of respect. But this boy has proven me wrong." Zekthar nodded slowly. "We have underestimated them. Our intelligence reports focused on their technology, their weapons, their military capabilities. But we forgot to look at their hearts. This boy may be young and small, but he has the spirit of a true warrior. If others of his kind share even a fraction of his courage, we should not be planning to conquer them. We should be seeking them as allies." It was a radical thought. For generations, the Vexari had viewed other species as either threats to be eliminated or resources to be exploited. They respected strength above all else, and until now, humans had not demonstrated the kind of strength that mattered to Vexari culture. Military power was one thing, but true strength came from the refusal to surrender, from facing death without fear. That was Krathzor, and it was sacred. Several hours later, Kyle began to wake up. His first sensation was warmth. He was lying on something soft and comfortable, very different from the hard canyon floor. His second sensation was the absence of pain. His arm still ached, but the sharp, agonizing pain was gone. He felt bandaged and secure. His eyes fluttered open, and confusion immediately set in. He was in a small room with walls that seemed to glow with a soft blue light. Strange equipment surrounded him. Machines with displays showing symbols he did not recognize, and standing nearby was something that made his heart race with fear. A Vexari warrior towered over him, at least 7 feet tall, with scales the color of old bronze. The alien's face was both terrifying and strangely beautiful, angular and fierce, with golden eyes that watched him carefully. Kyle tried to sit up, panic flooding through him. He had heard stories about the Vexari. They were supposed to be dangerous, aggressive, hostile to humans. The emergency alarms at New Haven's security office had been ringing for the past hour. Lieutenant Nina Brooks ran her hands through her short dark hair in frustration as she stared at the screens in front of her. Something big was out there in the forest. Something with a powerful energy signature that her equipment had never detected before. It had appeared suddenly, stayed in one location for several hours, and was now moving toward the colony. "Sir, what do we do?" asked Officer Greg Chen, one of her 6 security personnel. "Should we evacuate the settlement?" Nina shook her head. "We do not have time for a full evacuation. Whatever it is will be here in minutes. Get everyone inside their homes and seal the doors. Grab whatever weapons we have and meet me at the main entrance." As Chen ran to follow her orders, Nina activated the colony-wide communication system. Attention all residents. This is Lieutenant Brooks. We have an unidentified contact approaching the settlement. This is not a drill. Everyone must go inside your homes immediately and lock your doors. Stay away from windows. Security personnel will handle the situation. I repeat, this is not a drill. Across the colony, people stopped what they were doing and hurried to safety. Parents grabbed their children and ran for their houses. Farmers abandoned their equipment in the fields. The usually peaceful settlement transformed into a scene of controlled panic. Everyone had drills for this kind of situation, but no one had ever expected to actually need them. Peter Morrison was in his barn when the alarm sounded. His first thought was of Kyle. His son had been gone all day, supposedly collecting samples for his biology project. Peter had assumed Kyle was somewhere in the safe zones near the colony. But now, with an unknown threat approaching, he realized with growing dread that Kyle might be out there, alone, and in danger. Peter grabbed his old service rifle from its case. He had hoped never to use it again, had wanted to leave his military life behind forever. But if his son was in trouble, no force in the universe would stop him from going to find Kyle. He loaded the rifle with practiced efficiency and headed for the door. Nina and her officers had positioned themselves at the main entrance to the colony, weapons ready. They did not have much in the way of firepower. A few rifles, some sidearms, and one plasma cannon that was older than Nina herself. Against a serious military threat, they would not last 5 minutes. But they were all New Haven had. The sun had nearly set when they saw it. A figure emerged from the forest, walking slowly and deliberately toward them. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall, covered in scales that gleamed like bronze in the fading light. A Vexari, and in its arms it carried something small and human. "Hold your fire," Nina shouted, though her own hand shook as she aimed her rifle at the approaching alien. The Vexari continued walking, seeming completely unconcerned about the weapons pointed at it. As it got closer, Nina could see that it was carrying a boy. A human boy with brown hair and blood-stained clothes. Her blood ran cold. They had taken a hostage. This was exactly the kind of incident that could start a war between humans and Vexari. Nina's finger tightened on the trigger, but she forced herself to wait. She needed to understand the situation before making it worse. The Vexari stopped about 20 feet from the security barricade. Its golden eyes swept across the assembled humans, showing no fear despite being outnumbered and outgunned. When it spoke, its voice was deep and resonant with an accent that made some words sound strange but was still perfectly understandable. "I am Commander Zekthar of Clan Zekthor," the alien announced. "I come in peace. This boy was injured in the forest. We have treated his wounds. I am returning him to you now unharmed." Nina's mind raced. Injured in the forest? Treated his wounds? This was not what she had expected at all. Before she could respond, someone pushed past the barricade. Peter Morrison ran forward, his rifle forgotten, his face twisted with fear and relief. "Kyle," he shouted. "Is that my son? What have you done to him?" "Peter Morrison, I presume," Zekthar said calmly. "Your son is a remarkable young man. He encountered a razor stalker in the forest and fought it with extraordinary courage. We witnessed the battle and provided medical assistance after the creature retreated. He has a broken arm and several lacerations, but our medic has treated him. He will recover fully." Peter stared at the alien in shock. "He fought a razor stalker? How is he even alive?" "Because he refused to surrender," Zekthar replied. "He stood his ground and fought with weapons inadequate for the task, against an opponent much stronger than himself. He displayed what we call Krathzor, a concept sacred to my people. He has earned our deepest respect." The commander walked forward slowly, still holding Kyle carefully. Peter rushed to meet him, and Zekthar gently transferred the boy into his father's arms. Kyle was conscious but groggy, his eyes barely open. "Dad?" he mumbled. "I am here, son," Peter said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are safe now." Peter looked up at the towering alien who had saved his son's life. "Thank you," he said simply. "I do not know why you helped him, but thank you." Zekthar inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Your son has a warrior's heart. We could not let such courage go unrewarded." He placed a hand over his chest in what seemed to be a formal gesture. "I have marked him with the symbol of Krathzor. This identifies him as being under the protection of Clan Zekthor. Any Vexari who encounters him will know that he has earned our respect and must not be harmed." Nina had lowered her rifle and approached cautiously. "Commander Zekthar," she said, "I am Lieutenant Nina Brooks, head of security for New Haven. I do not fully understand what has happened here, but on behalf of the colony, I thank you for helping one of our people." Zekthar turned his attention to her. "Lieutenant Brooks, I must inform you that my patrol has been surveying this region for the past 3 days. We were evaluating the area for potential territorial claims. However, after witnessing your young warrior's courage, I believe my initial assessment of humanity was incorrect. I will be recommending to my superiors that we pursue diplomatic relations with your species, rather than viewing you as competitors for resources." Nina blinked in surprise. "You mean you were preparing to claim this planet?" "That was a possibility we were considering, yes," the commander admitted, "but that has changed. Kyle Morrison has shown me that humans possess qualities worthy of respect. I cannot speak for the High Council, but I will advocate strongly for peaceful coexistence between our peoples." A murmur ran through the assembled security officers. This was huge news. The Vexari were one of the most powerful military forces in this sector of space. If they decided to pursue friendship instead of conflict with humanity, it could change everything. Kyle stirred in his father's arms and opened his eyes more fully. He saw the crowd of people staring at him and the massive form of Commander Zekthar standing nearby. The alien warrior met his gaze and gave what might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell with the Vexari face. "Rest well, young Kyle," Zekthar said. "You have done more today than you realize. Your courage may have changed the fate of 2 species." With that, the commander turned and began walking back toward the forest. Nina called after him. "Commander, will we see you again?" Zekthar paused and looked back. "Perhaps if the High Council approves diplomatic contact, I would be honored to return. Until then, keep your young warrior safe. He is precious." Then he was gone, disappearing into the shadows of the forest as silently as he had come. Minutes later, the security team's sensors detected a powerful energy signature lifting off from somewhere in the woods. The Vexari ship was leaving. Nina let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. What a day. Peter carried Kyle to the medical clinic where Dr. Helen Grant waited with her small staff. She was a capable physician who had seen her share of injuries during her years on the frontier, but even she was impressed by the quality of the Vexari medical work. Kyle's arm had been perfectly set, the internal bleeding stopped, and the lacerations treated with some kind of advanced healing agent. All she needed to do was monitor him and make sure he rested. Kyle drifted in and out of sleep as his father sat beside his bed. Peter held his son's hand and tried to process everything that had happened. Kyle had fought a razor stalker, alone, and survived. The thought filled Peter with equal parts pride and terror. He had trained his son in survival skills, but he had never imagined Kyle would need to use them in such a desperate situation. As the night wore on, word of what had happened spread through the colony. By morning, everyone knew the story. Kyle Morrison, the quiet 14-year-old who spent most of his time studying plants and animals, had fought one of the planet's deadliest predators and earned the respect of an alien commander. It seemed almost like a fairy tale, except for the glowing mark on Kyle's forehead that proved it was all real. Nina spent the night writing detailed reports about the encounter. She knew that as soon as she sent these reports to Earth Command, things would start moving very quickly. First contact with a Vexari patrol, the revelation that they had been surveying the planet, the incredible story of Kyle's fight and the alien commander's response. Every part of it would need to be analyzed and discussed by people far more important than a frontier security officer. 3 weeks after the incident, Kyle's life had become completely different. The glowing mark on his forehead had faded to a faint silver line that was barely visible, but everything else had changed. News of what happened had spread far beyond New Haven, first to the other human colonies, then to Earth itself, and finally across the entire network of human settlements scattered among the stars. Reporters had come to New Haven like a swarm of hungry insects. They set up cameras outside the Morrison farm, tried to interview anyone who knew Kyle, and sent drones flying over the colony at all hours. Lieutenant Brooks had to assign 2 officers just to keep them from bothering the family. Kyle found the attention overwhelming. He had just been trying to survive. He did not understand why everyone cared so much, but the adults understood. Humanity had been expanding into space for almost 200 years. During that time, they had met dozens of alien species. Some were friendly, some were neutral, and some were hostile. The Vexari had always been hostile. There had been fights over borders, disputes over territory, and several times when Vexari warships had fired on human vessels. Everyone expected a full war to break out eventually. Then a 14-year-old boy from a tiny farming colony had changed everything. Commander Zekthar's report had reached the Vexari High Council. They watched the video footage of Kyle's fight dozens of times. The idea of Krathzor was deeply important to Vexari culture. To see a human, especially such a young one, show it so perfectly had shocked them. The High Council sent a formal message to Earth's government. It was the first time the Vexari had started peaceful contact with humanity. They spoke about Kyle Morrison by name, praised his courage, and asked to open diplomatic talks. The message ended with a request that surprised everyone. They wanted to meet Kyle in person. They wanted to invite him to visit their homeworld as an honored guest. Kyle sat at the kitchen table in his family's farmhouse, staring at the official letter that arrived that morning. It was printed on real paper, with seals and signatures from people so important he had only seen them on news broadcasts. The President of the Earth Federation, the Secretary of Space Affairs, the Director of Alien Relations, all of them were asking him to accept the Vexari invitation. "I do not want to go," Kyle said quietly. His father sat across from him looking tired. Peter had barely slept in the past 3 weeks, dealing with reporters and government officials and everyone else who wanted to talk to his son. "I know, son," Peter said. "But this is bigger than what you want or what I want. This is about the future of our entire species. If the Vexari want to be friends instead of enemies, we need to encourage that. And you are the key to making it happen." Kyle put his head in his hands. "I just wanted to collect some samples for my biology project. How did everything get so complicated?" Peter reached across the table and squeezed his son's shoulder. "Because sometimes ordinary people do amazing things, and that changes the world. You showed incredible courage, Kyle. Not just in fighting that creature, but in refusing to give up even when you knew you could not win. That is rare. That is special, and now the universe knows about it." They sat quietly for a while. Finally, Kyle looked up. "If I go, will you come with me?" "Of course," Peter said immediately. "I am not letting you face this alone. We are in this together." Kyle took a deep breath and nodded slowly. "Okay, I will go, but I do not want to be turned into some kind of symbol. I just want to meet Commander Zekthar again and learn about his people." 2 weeks later, Kyle and Peter found themselves on a human diplomatic ship called the Ambassador. They were heading toward the Vexari homeworld of Vexar Prime. The ship was much nicer than the simple transport shuttles Kyle was used to. It had comfortable rooms, a full kitchen, and even a small gym, but Kyle barely noticed any of it. He spent most of the 3-day journey staring out the window at the stars, wondering what he was getting himself into. The diplomatic team traveling with them tried to prepare Kyle for what to expect. They gave him lessons about Vexari culture, their customs, their language, their history. They taught him the proper way to greet a Vexari warrior, how to show respect without appearing weak, and what topics to avoid in conversation. Kyle tried to learn it all, but there was so much information it made his head hurt. Ambassador Patricia Long was the leader of the human group. She was a tall woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been a diplomat for 30 years and had made treaties with half a dozen alien species. But even she seemed nervous about this mission. "Kyle," she said during one of their practice sessions, "I want you to understand something important. What you do and say on Vexar Prime could shape the relationship between humans and Vexari for generations. I am not trying to put pressure on you, but you need to know how important this is. This might be the most important diplomatic mission in human history." Kyle felt his stomach twist with worry. That is a lot of pressure for a 14-year-old kid who just wanted to study biology. Patricia smiled slightly. "I know, but you have already proven you can handle pressure. You faced a predator that should have killed you and you did not break. That is the kind of strength the Vexari respect. Just be yourself. Be honest and show the same courage you showed in that canyon. That is all we can ask." When they finally arrived at Vexar Prime, Kyle pressed his face against the window to get his first look at the planet. It was beautiful in an alien way. The oceans were deep purple, and the continents were covered in plants that ranged from bright red to dark orange. 3 moons hung in the sky, each a different size. The planet was larger than Earth, with stronger gravity that would make everything feel heavier. The ambassador got permission to land at the capital city, a huge place called Zekthar Prime. Kyle noticed the city was named after Commander Zekthar and asked Patricia about it. She explained that in Vexari culture, great warriors often had cities or landmarks named after them. The fact that the capital city had Zekthar's name meant he was extremely important and respected. They landed at a military spaceport. Kyle felt his heart racing as the ship's doors opened. Peter put a hand on his shoulder. "Remember, son, you have already earned their respect. They invited you here because they admire what you did. You have nothing to prove." Kyle nodded and walked down the ramp with his father and the diplomatic team. The heat hit him immediately. Vexar Prime was much warmer than Kepler, and the air felt thick and heavy. But what really surprised him was the welcoming party waiting for them. There were at least 200 Vexari warriors lined up in perfect rows. They wore special armor that shined in the sunlight with weapons held at their sides. At the front stood Commander Zekthar, looking even more impressive than Kyle remembered. Next to him was another Vexari who was even larger, with scales the color of pure gold and scars that showed he had been in countless battles. "Kyle Morrison," Zekthar called out, his voice carrying across the landing area. "Welcome to Vexar Prime. On behalf of Clan Zekthor and the High Council, I welcome you as an honored guest and brother in spirit." Then something happened that made Kyle's eyes go wide with shock. All 200 warriors raised their weapons and struck them against their chests 3 times together. The sound was like thunder. "It is a salute," Patricia whispered to him. "The highest honor they can give a warrior." Kyle felt completely overwhelmed. He had practiced what to say, how to respond, but his mind went blank. Finally, he just did what felt natural. He walked forward, stopped in front of Commander Zekthar, and held out his hand. "Thank you for saving my life," he said simply, "and thank you for inviting me here." Zekthar looked down at the offered hand for a moment, then took it firmly. Kyle's small human hand disappeared in the massive clawed hand of the Vexari warrior, but the grip was gentle, careful not to hurt. "You saved your own life, young Kyle. I just made sure you survived to tell the story. Come. There is much to see and much to discuss." The large, golden-scaled Vexari stepped forward. "I am High Commander Tharquan, leader of the High Council. Your actions have impressed us greatly, Kyle Morrison. We have watched the video of your battle many times. You displayed perfect Krathzor. In my 400 years of life, I have seen few warriors, Vexari or otherwise, show such pure spirit." 400 years, Kyle thought. The Vexari lived much longer than humans. This being in front of him had been fighting battles when Earth was still learning about space travel. The weight of that history pressed down on him. "I am honored by your words," Kyle managed to say, "but I was just trying to survive. I did not know I was doing anything special." "That is what makes it special," Tharquan replied. "You did not fight for glory or honor. You fought because you had to, and you refused to give up even when giving up would have been easier. That is the heart of Krathzor. It is not about winning. It is about refusing to surrender no matter what." Over the next several days, Kyle experienced things he had never imagined. Commander Zekthar personally showed him around the capital city, explaining Vexari history and culture. They visited the Hall of Warriors, a massive building filled with statues and monuments to Vexari heroes throughout history. Zekthar told him stories of great battles, of warriors who had faced impossible odds and refused to yield. 6 months had passed since Kyle's visit to Vexar Prime. The galaxy had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. The ceremony recognizing Kyle as an honorary member of Clan Zekthor had been broadcast across both human and Vexari space. Billions of people from both species had watched. The response had been overwhelming. In the weeks following the ceremony, human and Vexari diplomats had worked day and night to create a formal treaty. It was called the Accord of New Haven, named after the colony where everything began. The treaty established peace between the two species, opened trade routes, created cultural exchange programs, and most importantly, set up a mutual defense agreement. If either species was attacked, the other would come to help. The signing ceremony for the accord was held on neutral ground, a space station that orbited a star halfway between human and Vexari territory. Representatives from both governments gathered in the station's main hall. Kyle was there too, sitting in the front row with his father. He wore the armor that Clan Zekthor had given him, polished until it shined. The president of the Earth Federation, an older man named Gerald Harper, spoke first. Today marks a new beginning for humanity and the Vexari people. For too long we have viewed each other with suspicion and fear. But one brave young man showed us that courage and honor transcend species. Kyle Morrison's actions reminded us that we have more in common than we realized. This treaty is not just about peace. It is about building a friendship that will last for generations. High Commander Tharquan spoke next. The Vexari have always prized strength above all else. We believed that strength came from weapons and warriors. But Kyle Morrison taught us a different lesson. True strength comes from the spirit, from the refusal to surrender even in the face of death. Humanity has shown us this strength. They are worthy not just of peace but of respect and alliance. Today we do not sign a treaty. We forge a bond of brotherhood. When the speeches ended, President Harper and High Commander Tharquan approached a table where the treaty document waited. It was printed on a special material that would last for thousands of years. Both leaders signed their names with ceremonial pens. Then they did something unexpected. They called Kyle forward. "Kyle Morrison," President Harper said. "This treaty exists because of you. Your courage made this possible. We would like you to add your name to this document so that future generations will remember where it all began." Kyle felt his hands shaking as he took the pen. He looked at his father, who nodded with pride. Then Kyle signed his name below the signatures of the two most powerful leaders in this part of the galaxy. It felt surreal. He was just a kid from a farming colony, but his name would be forever linked to one of the most important treaties in history. After the ceremony, there was a reception where people from both species mingled. Kyle found himself surrounded by important officials who wanted to shake his hand and thank him. It was overwhelming, but he handled it with the same quiet dignity he had shown throughout this entire experience. Commander Zekthar found Kyle on a balcony overlooking the stars. The young human was taking a break from the crowds, looking out at the infinite darkness dotted with points of light. The Vexari warrior stood beside him in comfortable silence for a moment. "How are you holding up?" Zekthar asked. "I am okay," Kyle said. "Just a little tired. This is all still hard to believe. You have handled it well." Many would have let the attention change them, make them arrogant or entitled. But you remain humble. That is another form of strength. Kyle looked up at the tall warrior. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you really think this will last? The peace between our people?" Zekthar considered the question carefully. "Nothing is certain. There will be challenges. Some humans will not trust us. Some Vexari will not trust you. Old prejudices die hard. But I believe we have a real chance. Because this peace was not built on treaties and politics alone. It was built on genuine respect. You earned our respect through your actions, and we earned yours by recognizing those actions. That is a stronger foundation than most alliances have." "I hope you are right," Kyle said quietly. "So do I, young warrior. So do I." Back on New Haven, life had returned to something resembling normal. The reporters had finally left. The colony went back to its quiet routines of farming and building and living. But there were changes. The Vexari had sent engineers to help upgrade the colony's defenses, not because they thought New Haven needed protection, but as a gesture of friendship. Human and Vexari workers labored side by side, learning to communicate despite their differences. Lieutenant Nina Brooks had been promoted. She now commanded a joint security force made up of both human and Vexari personnel. It was one of the first mixed units in history. There were challenges, of course. The two species had different communication styles, different tactics, different cultural expectations. But they were learning to work together. Kyle returned to New Haven a hero, but he tried hard to go back to being a normal kid. He went to school, helped his father on the farm, and continued his biology studies. But things were different now. His classmates looked at him with awe. Teachers gave him special attention he did not want. And there were constant requests for interviews, speeches, and appearances. He struggled with it at first, feeling lost and overwhelmed. But slowly he found his balance. He accepted that his life had changed forever, but he did not have to let it define him completely. He could still be Kyle Morrison, the kid who loved studying animals. He just happened to also be Kyle Morrison, the boy who earned the respect of an alien species. Commander Zekthar kept in touch. They communicated regularly through video calls. The Vexari warrior had become something like a mentor to Kyle, teaching him about leadership, courage, and responsibility. Their friendship was genuine, built on mutual respect and shared experience. One day, About a year after the treaty was signed, Kyle received an unexpected message. It was from Vexari High Command. They were creating a new program, something called the Cross-Species Ambassador Initiative. Young people from both humans and Vexari would be trained together, learning about each other's cultures and working to strengthen the alliance between their species. They wanted Kyle to be part of the first class. Kyle read the message 3 times, then went to find his father. Peter was in the barn, fixing a piece of equipment that had broken down. He looked up as Kyle approached. "What is it, son? You look like you have something on your mind." Kyle showed him the message. "The Vexari want me to join this ambassador program. I would have to leave New Haven for a year, live on a space station, train with Vexari and human students. They want me to help build bridges between our species." Peter read the message carefully. "What do you want to do?" "I do not know," Kyle admitted. "Part of me wants to say yes. I feel like I started something and I should see it through. But another part of me just wants to stay here, finish school, have a normal life." Peter put down his tools and sat on a bale of hay. He gestured for Kyle to sit beside him. "Let me tell you something I learned in the military. Sometimes life gives you opportunities that are bigger than you are. You can ignore them and live a quiet, comfortable life, or you can accept them and do something meaningful. Even if it is hard, neither choice is wrong. But you have to be honest with yourself about which one will leave you with regrets." Kyle thought about that. "If I say no, will I always wonder what might have been? Maybe. Or maybe you will be perfectly happy staying here. Only you can answer that." They sat together in the barn for a long time, not speaking, just being together. Finally, Kyle made his decision. "I want to do it. I want to be part of the ambassador program. This is important and I can help. I have to try." Peter pulled his son into a hug. "I am proud of you, Kyle." So proud. 6 months later, Kyle found himself on Ambassador Station Delta, a massive space station that had been built specifically for the Cross-Species Initiative. There were 30 students in the first class, 15 humans and 15 Vexari, all around Kyle's age. They would spend a year learning together, training together, and preparing to become ambassadors between their peoples. The first few weeks were awkward. The human students were nervous around the Vexari, who were so much larger and looked so fierce. The Vexari students were unsure how to interact with humans who seemed fragile and soft. But slowly, barriers began to break down. They trained together in combat simulations. They studied each other's languages and cultures. They ate meals together in the station's dining hall, sharing stories about their homes and families. Friendships formed. The human students learned that Vexari had the same fears and hopes they did. The Vexari students learned that humans were stronger than they looked, especially in spirit. Kyle became close with a Vexari student named Kriva. She was the daughter of a high-ranking military commander and had grown up believing humans were weak and unworthy of respect. But working with Kyle and the other human students had changed her mind completely. She told Kyle one day that watching his video, seeing him fight the Razor Stalker, had inspired her to join the program. "You made me realize that courage is not about size or strength," she said. "It is about the spirit, about refusing to give up. My people needed to learn that lesson. You taught it to us.